Ensign Daniel Carr had learned long ago that life on a deep space vessel was supposed to be predictable. The Resolute was a model of human engineering: sealed corridors, timed shifts, recycled air, and routine drills. Nothing unexpected happened out here. Nothing ever did. That was why the first night unsettled him so much. It happened at exactly RO2-14 ship time. Daniel had been half asleep, lying on his bunk with the dim glow of the ceiling light set to night cycle. He remembered rolling over, trying to sink deeper into dreams when he felt the air in the room shift, a kind of stillness that pressed against his chest. When he opened his eyes, a woman was standing there. She was no crew member. He would have known instantly. The Resolute had only 150 souls aboard, and Daniel could list most by face, rank, and specialty. This woman did not belong to them. She stood in the middle of his quarters with her hands at her sides, head tilted slightly, eyes faintly glowing like pale embers. She did not move. She did not breathe. She only stared. Daniel's first reaction was instinctive. He jerked upright, fumbling for the comm panel near his bunk. Security. But when he blinked, she was gone. No sound of doors opening, no footsteps retreating down the corridor. Nothing but the faint hum of the Resolute's life support systems. His room looked unchanged, the shadows unmoving, the air calm again. He spent the rest of the night awake, heart pounding, replaying what he had seen. The next morning, over the mess hall's tasteless rehydrated breakfast, Daniel tried to mention it casually to his squad mate. Lieutenant Wexler, you're saying a ghost came into your room? Wexler chuckled, stirring his nutrient pack like it was soup. You've been watching too many horror feeds. I'm serious, Daniel said, lowering his voice. She was standing there. Didn't come through the door. Didn't vanish through the door either. 1 second she was there, the next, nothing. Wexler smirked. Then maybe you dreamed it. Happens. Long watches, recycled air, empty stars. Messes with your head. Daniel forced himself to nod, but deep down he knew he had not been dreaming. The second night removed all doubt. He forced himself to stay awake, lying rigid in his bunk, waiting. The ship's clock ticked toward the moment. 02:13, 02:14, and then, like before, she was there, same place. Same posture, same unblinking stare. Daniel whispered, voice trembling. Who are you? No response. He stood slowly, careful not to startle her, though she gave no sign of noticing him at all. He took 1 step closer, then another, and then, just like the night before, she vanished, not in a burst of light, not in a shimmer or distortion. She simply ceased to exist, like a candle blown out. But this time, something was different. The mug on his desk had moved. It had been next to his datapad before he lay down. Now it sat at the far edge, tilted slightly as if nudged by a careless hand. Daniel stared at it for a long time. His pulse thudded in his ears. She was not just an image in his mind. She was real. On the third night, Daniel set up his datapad to record. He positioned it carefully, its lens pointed straight at the center of the room. Then he lay down, pretending to sleep. The hours dragged until the ship's clock finally struck 02:14. The air shifted, and she appeared again. Daniel kept his breathing slow, his eyes slitted, pretending he was still asleep. She did not move, only stared. Seconds ticked by. Then, without warning, the datapad blinked. Its recording light flickered. When Daniel checked the feed the next morning, he found that exactly 4 seconds of video were missing. One moment, his empty room stared back at him. The next, the datapad showed him lying in bed, and the mug on his desk had shifted again. His stomach turned cold. By the fourth night, he couldn't keep it to himself. He filed a report with security, crisp and formal, exactly by the book. The officer on duty looked skeptical as he scanned the entry. You're claiming someone bypassed every lock and sensor aboard to stand in your quarters for less than a minute doing nothing but staring at you? And our systems didn't catch it? Yes, sir, Daniel said stiffly. The officer sighed, handed back the report and muttered, Get some sleep, Ensign. But that night he convinced his roommate, Petty Officer Harland, to stay awake with him. Just keep watch, Daniel whispered as the clock neared the moment. Harland grumbled but agreed. At or 2:14, the woman appeared. Harland sat bolt upright, his mouth open in a silent scream. He clawed at his eyes like he was trying to shut out something unbearable. Daniel grabbed him by the shoulders, shouting his name, and then she was gone. Harland collapsed, trembling, gasping for breath. When Daniel pressed him for details, he shook his head violently. I don't remember. I don't want to remember. The next day, Harland requested transfer to a different bunk. His eyes darted nervously whenever he saw Daniel. Daniel now knew 3 things with certainty. First, he was not imagining her. Others had seen her too. Second, she could alter the physical world however subtly. And third, she wanted something. Because every night she appeared, she was standing closer to him than the night before, and Daniel was no longer sure he wanted to know what would happen when she finally reached him. Ensign Daniel Carr had stopped pretending this was just stress or a dream. After 4 nights after Harland's panicked reaction, there was no way to deny it. Something or someone was entering his room at 02:14 every night. But the strangest thing wasn't her appearance. It was the way the Resolute ignored. The ship's systems were designed to track every movement on board. Each door was logged, each corridor monitored, each life sign measured by medical sensors. But the woman's visits left no trace. She was invisible to the Resolute. That realization made Daniel feel smaller than ever. He decided to fight back the only way he could think of, with proof. On the 5th night, he prepared carefully. He placed not just his data pad, but also 3 handheld recorders in different corners of the room. He set the internal sensors to run a private scan, masking the request so that security wouldn't notice. He even taped a sheet of paper to the wall with a pencil tied on a string. If she moved anything, he would know for certain. And then he waited. At 02:14, the air pressed down again. His chest tightened. She appeared the same as always, her pale, glowing eyes staring through the dark. The data pad blinked. The recorders all froze at once. For 4 long seconds, silence. Then, without warning, the feeds jumped forward again. The pencil lay on the floor. The sheet of paper had a single mark drawn across it, jagged and sharp, like a line carved by an unsteady hand. Daniel's heart thudded. She had written something. The next morning, he analyzed the radiation trace left behind. The science officer, Lieutenant Havers, caught him studying the data on a borrowed console. "Carr," she said, frowning. "Where did you get this?" Daniel hesitated. He wanted to lie. He wanted to protect himself, but the weight of it was too much. So he told her. Not everything, but enough. He told her that an anomaly was appearing in his room, leaving behind strange readings. She leaned over the console. "This isn't noise. Look." Havers tapped the screen, pointing to the repeating peaks. "See the rhythm? That's structure. Whatever left this trace wasn't random. It's almost like language." Daniel froze. "Language? Not one I recognize," Havers admitted, "but definitely patterned." For the first time, Daniel felt both terrified and relieved. Someone else saw it now. Someone smart. Someone who wouldn't laugh. But the captain didn't share the same view. When Havers brought the data to him, Captain Bray folded his arms and stared at Daniel like he was a child. "You're telling me a ghost has been visiting your room?" Bray said flatly. "And she's leaving messages and radiation signatures?" Daniel swallowed. "Sir, I've got physical proof. She moved objects. Bray cut him off. "The only thing I see here is an officer who needs rest. Drop this, Ensign." "That's an order." Daniel clenched his fists behind his back, biting down on the frustration rising in his throat. "Yes, sir." But he had no intention of dropping it. That night, he tried again. He angled his datapad differently, hoping to catch even a blur of movement when she appeared. At 02:14, the air pressed down. She appeared closer than ever before. Her eyes seemed brighter, almost burning. Daniel whispered, "What do you want from me?" No response. But then something new happened. She tilted her head, just slightly, as though she had heard him. As though she was considering him. And then she was gone. When Daniel checked the recordings the next morning, the gap was longer. Not 4 seconds, 7. And in those missing 7 seconds, the paper on the wall had been slashed with another jagged line. This one intersected the first, forming an angle. Not random, not chaos, a deliberate mark. By now, word had spread among the lower decks. Crew whispered when Daniel walked past. Some avoided his gaze. Others looked curious, even nervous. Nobody wanted to say it outright, but they all knew something was happening to him. Wexler cornered him in the mess hall. "Listen, Carr," he muttered, keeping his voice low. "You need to stop this. People think you're cursed. You don't want that kind of reputation out here." Daniel leaned forward. "She's real. She leaves marks. She leaves radiation. Signatures. This isn't a curse, it's communication." Wexler shook his head. "Or it's you losing it." But Daniel saw the flicker of unease in his friend's eyes. Wexler might not admit it, but even he was starting to wonder. On the 7th night, Daniel refused to lie still. He stood, waiting for her, his datapad running, every sensor in his room armed. Appeared. Nobody expected them this far from the border. The Zarth Collective usually kept to their territory, only striking when humans pushed too close. Yet now, a black, jagged cruiser slid into view on the bridge's main display, bristling, with weapons that pulsed like molten scars. "Zarth vessel detected," the tactical officer reported, her voice sharp with tension. "Powering shields, weapons charging." Captain Bray's face tightened. "All stations, prepare for engagement." Daniel Carr strapped himself into his seat at the comm station. His hands shook, but not because of the enemy ship. His mind kept drifting back to the triangle drawn on his wall. 3 lines, a pattern, coordinates that pointed to somewhere unknown. And somehow, the woman was tied to it. Now, with the Zarth ship looming larger on the screen, he felt the same heavy pressure in the air. The same sensation he always felt at O214. She was here. The Zarth didn't bother with diplomacy. A piercing shriek burst across the comm channels, a sound so alien it made Daniel's teeth ache. It wasn't language meant to be understood. It was intimidation. A threat. Shields at 70%. Tactical reported as the first volley of plasma struck the Resolute. The ship shuddered under the impact. Daniel's console flickered. For an instant, his display went black. Then, across the dark glass, a reflection appeared. Her reflection. The woman stood behind him, though when he turned his head, she wasn't there. Only her reflection remained, her glowing eyes staring into his. Daniel swallowed hard. "Captain." I think. Before he could finish, alarms blared. The Zarth cruiser unleashed a storm of fire. The Resolute's shields buckled. Sparks rained across the bridge as circuits overloaded. The crew shouted orders, their voices overlapping in chaos. Daniel gripped his console. His display twisted into static, then reformed. But the data scrolling, across it wasn't human code anymore. Symbols glowed in strange angular lines sharp as blades. He didn't know how, but he understood them. They were coordinates. They were instructions. "She's trying to help us," Daniel whispered, eyes darting across the alien script. The woman's reflection moved her lips again, silent, but the meaning echoed in his mind. Not logic. Instinct. "Ensign Carr," Captain Bray barked. "Report." Daniel hesitated, then said, "Sir, I have a firing solution. It's not from our systems. It's coming from somewhere else. But I think it'll work." Bray's eyes narrowed. "Explain." "I can't," Daniel admitted, his voice shaking. "But if we follow it, we might stand a chance." For a long second, silence hung over the bridge. Then another blast rocked the Resolute, dimming the lights. "Do it!" Bray snapped. Daniel's fingers flew over his console. The alien coordinates fed into the Resolute's targeting system, bending it into shapes it wasn't designed for. The weapons officer looked alarmed as her screen filled with impossible firing arcs. "This isn't stable," she began. "Fire!" the captain ordered. The Resolute unleashed a volley of torpedoes that curved unnaturally, weaving through the void in ways that defied the crew's training. The Zarth ship tried to counter, shields shifting, weapons flaring. But the torpedoes struck at perfect weak points, punching through armor like knives through glass. The alien cruiser split apart in silence, shards scattering like dying embers. The bridge fell quiet. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then the crew broke into relieved cheers. Some clapped shoulders, others sagged in their seats with shaky laughter. The Zarth cruiser was gone. The Resolute was still alive, but Daniel couldn't celebrate, because when he looked back at his console, the alien symbols were still there, glowing faintly, even though the systems should have erased them, and in the glass reflection, the woman was smiling. Not kindly, not cruelly, just watching. After the battle, Captain Bray summoned Daniel to his ready room. The captain stood by the viewport staring out at the wreckage drifting in the stars. His hands were clasped behind his back. "You saved this ship, Ensign," Bray said without turning. "But you're going to tell me how." Daniel hesitated. He wanted to lie. He wanted to say he'd spotted a weakness in the Zarth defenses, that it had been human instinct, human genius. But the memory of her glowing eyes wouldn't leave him, so he told the truth. He told the captain about the nightly appearances, about the marks on the wall, about the coordinates, about the alien script that only he could see. When he finished, Bray finally turned to look at him. His expression was unreadable. "You're telling me," Bray said slowly, "that a phantom is feeding you alien strategies." Daniel stood straighter. "Sir, whatever she is, she's real, and she wants me to follow her." The captain studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded once. "If she saved us today, I'm not in the mood to argue, but understand this, Ensign. If this thing turns against us, it won't just be your life at risk. It'll be all of ours." Daniel swallowed. "I understand, sir." That night, Daniel didn't wait for her. He sat awake in the dark, staring at the wall where the triangle was drawn. At 02:14, she appeared again. Closer than ever, her face only a few feet from his. Daniel whispered, "You saved us. Why?" Her lips moved soundlessly, but this time a whisper brushed his mind. Faint, fragile, almost like a dream. "Follow." Daniel's heart pounded. "Follow where?" Her glowing eyes softened, almost sad. "Home." And then she was gone. Daniel lay back on his bunk, trembling. The Zarth should have destroyed them. They hadn't, because of her. But if she wanted him to follow her home, where exactly was home for something that didn't exist in any ship's log, in any human record, in any rational explanation? And why did he feel that the closer he got to the answer, the more dangerous it would become? After the battle with the Zarth, the Resolute limped through the quiet dark of space, engines bruised, shields cracked, and crew exhausted. But the ship still moved, still lived, and that alone was victory. To the crew, the fight was over. But to Ensign Daniel Carr, it was only beginning. Because every night at 02:14, the woman still came, and now she did more than stare. The marks on his wall grew. The first triangle became part of a larger design, each night adding another line, another shape. Circles, curves, strange patterns that looked almost like star maps. Daniel studied them in the dim light, tracing the edges with his fingertips. He realized something that chilled him. These were coordinates, and not just to one place. They were directions. A map leading farther into the void. He wasn't the only one who noticed. Lieutenant Havers, the science officer, had been secretly studying the radiation traces left behind each night. When Daniel showed her the growing design, she grew pale. "This isn't random," she said, voice quiet. "This is navigation data. Old, maybe ancient, but precise." Daniel leaned closer. "Where does it lead?" She hesitated. "A dead system. Nothing there but a collapsed star in the ruins of some old structure. The records call it abandoned millennia ago." Daniel's chest tightened. "Then that's where she wants me to go." Captain Bray was furious when he heard. "You're suggesting," Bray snapped, "that I divert my ship already damaged into a dead system because some phantom scribbled triangles on your wall?" Daniel forced himself to stand his ground. "Sir, she guided us against the Zarth. Without her, we wouldn't be alive. She's leading us somewhere for a reason. If we ignore her, we could miss something important. Something bigger than we understand." The captain glared at him, jaw tight. For a long moment, Daniel thought he'd be dismissed outright, but then Bray exhaled slowly. "Dead systems don't usually attract Zarth patrols," Bray said. "Yet they were here. If this anomaly is tied to them, we can't risk leaving it unchecked." "Very well, Ensign. We'll investigate. But if this turns out to be nothing but shadows, you'll answer for it." Daniel saluted. "Understood, sir." The journey to the dead system took days. The crew patched hull damage, rerouted power, and tried to laugh off the strange rumors that spread through the corridors. Some whispered Daniel had made a pact with something inhuman. Others believed he was cursed, marked by the void itself. Daniel ignored them. He spent every free hour in his quarters waiting, watching. At 0214 the woman always appeared. But something had changed. She no longer stood in silence. Her head tilted, her lips moved, and Daniel began to hear faint whispers in his mind. Not full words, not yet, just feelings, images, a broken bridge across the dark, and one word that returned again and again. "Remember." When the Resolute arrived at the dead system, the sight stunned even the most seasoned officers. Orbiting the collapsed star was an enormous structure, a shattered ring that stretched across the void like the bones of a giant. Broken towers jutted outward, some glowing faintly with dead energy, others drifting loose, spinning silently. Lieutenant Havers whispered, "This isn't natural. It's a construct, a machine world." Captain Bray ordered scans, but the readings made little sense. The structure was older than any known civilization. Too old. Daniel, staring out from the viewport, felt his breath catch. He had seen this place before, in his dreams. That night, the woman came as always. But this time, she didn't just appear in his room. She stood at the foot of his bunk and reached out her hand. Daniel froze. His mind screamed at him not to move, not to touch her. But his hand lifted anyway, as if pulled by something deeper than choice. Her fingers brushed his, cold as starlight, and suddenly he was somewhere else. He stood on the broken ring itself. Not the dead ruin the scanners had shown, but whole and alive, glowing with endless lights. Alien figures walked pew. The Resolute drifted in silence near the ruins of the Great Ring. Its engines pulsed faintly, its shields hummed at low power, but otherwise the ship felt like it was holding its breath. The crew spoke in hushed tones, wary of disturbing whatever secret slept inside the dead system. Ensign Daniel Carr could not sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the vision again. The glowing city, the tall figures fading into ash, the woman's sad eyes as she whispered that her people had fallen because of perfection. He thought of those words over and over. Where? Logic failed. You must endure. Lieutenant Havers cornered him in the science lab. Her eyes were red from lack of rest, her hair tied back in a messy knot. She had been studying the recordings from the inner chamber for nearly 20 hours straight. "Carr," she said, dragging him to a console, "look at this." The screen showed the alien carvings found deep inside the ring. They looked jagged and complex, a pattern of lines intersecting and splitting apart. But as Daniel stared, something strange happened. The shapes shifted in his mind, forming into words he could understand. "It's instructions," he whispered. Havers blinked. You can read it? Daniel hesitated. Not exactly. It's like I know what it's supposed to mean, but I don't know how. She's showing me. Havers stared at him like he was both a miracle and a curse. Then it's true. She's not just haunting you. She's choosing you, Captain. Bray was less impressed when Daniel explained. Chosen by a ghost, Bray muttered. And now she wants us to follow alien blueprints. Ensign, do you realize how this sounds? Daniel clenched his fists. Sir, her people were greater than the Zarth. They built entire worlds, and they still fell. If she's showing us this, it's because we're different, because we can do what they couldn't. Bray narrowed his eyes. And what's that? Daniel forced himself to meet the captain's gaze. We adapt. We improvise. We survive chaos. The captain didn't answer, but Daniel saw the flicker of thought cross his face. That night the woman came again. This time Daniel didn't wait in silence. He sat on the edge of his bunk staring at her. You want us to carry you, he whispered. You want us to survive where you didn't. But why me? Why not the captain? Why not someone smarter, stronger, more important? Her glowing eyes softened. She tilted her head, and for the first time, her voice rang clearly in his mind, sharp and sad all at once. Because you question. Because you doubt. Because you resist. Daniel's throat tightened. Doubt had always been his weakness, his flaw. He second-guessed himself on every mission, always wondered if he was enough. And yet, to her, that was strength. Before he could speak again, she was gone. The next day, the Resolute's sensors screamed. A fleet of Zarth warships dropped into the system, black and jagged against the light of the collapsed star. At least 5 cruisers supported by escorts. The bridge fell into chaos. They were tracking us, Havers whispered, horrified. Battle stations, Bray barked, but everyone knew the truth. The Resolute was crippled from its last fight. They couldn't outgun this many ships. The crew exchanged grim looks, fear sharp in their eyes. And then Daniel felt it. The air shifted. The pressure built. She was here. His console flickered, alien symbols bleeding across the display. His head spun as knowledge poured into him. Fragments of a dead people's technology. Equations without context. Weapons without blueprints. Power without balance. It was broken, incomplete, illogical. But Daniel didn't need perfection. He needed possibility. He turned to the captain. Sir, I can use this. I can give us a chance. Bray looked at him, torn between disbelief and desperation. Outside, the Zarth fleet charged weapons. Inside, the crew's hands shook over their controls. Finally, the captain gave a single nod. Do it. Daniel's fingers flew across his console. He rerouted power in ways the ship's designers never intended. He twisted weapons arrays into unstable feedback loops. He overloaded shield harmonics until they flickered like broken glass. It was madness. No machine would have trusted it. No alien mind, bound by logic, would have dared it. But Daniel trusted chaos. The Zarth opened fire. The Resolute should have been destroyed instantly, but Daniel's improvised shields absorbed the blasts unevenly, scattering energy at strange angles. Plasma bolts curved away, exploding harmlessly in space. Return fire, the captain shouted. The Resolute's torpedoes didn't fly straight. They corkscrewed wildly, guided by Daniel's unstable algorithms. The Zarth tried to predict them, but the paths made no sense. One torpedo missed entirely, spiraling into empty dark. But the second slammed into a cruiser's heart, tearing it apart. Cheers erupted on the bridge. The Zarth regrouped furious. 3 ships closed in tight formation, their weapons locked. Daniel's mind raced. The alien fragments in his head screamed for perfection, for symmetry. But he shoved them aside. Instead, he chose chaos. He ordered random power surges through, the engines making the Resolute lurch unpredictably. He fired weapons in scattered bursts, never repeating the same pattern twice. To the Zarth, the human ship looked insane. To Daniel, it was survival. Another cruiser exploded. Then another. The bridge shook with every hit they took, but somehow, impossibly, they were still alive. At last, the surviving Zarth ships fled into the void, their captains unwilling to waste more lives on an enemy they could not understand. The bridge filled with exhausted laughter, cheers, and tears of relief. Daniel slumped in his chair, his body trembling, sweat pouring down his face. He had no strength left. His console flickered one last time, and in the reflection he saw her. The woman. She stood silently, glowing eyes filled with something that almost looked like pride. Her voice brushed his mind again, softer this time. Logic failed us. But you endure. And then she faded, leaving him in the dim light of the bridge, surrounded by a crew that would never look at him the same way again. The Resolute floated in silence after the battle, its hull scarred and smoking, its crew bruised but alive. Debris from the destroyed Zarth ships drifted around them, glowing faintly against the collapsed star's cold light. To many it felt like a miracle, but Ensign Daniel Carr knew it was something else. It was humanity. The crew worked tirelessly to patch the damage, but whispers spread through the ship like fire. They all knew the truth. They had survived because of Daniel, or rather because of her, the woman who came at 2:14 every night. Some called her a guardian, others a curse. Some avoided Daniel in the halls, their eyes full of unease. Others gave him nods of silent respect. Whatever she was, she had chosen him. Captain Bray summoned him to the ready room once again. The captain's face looked older, worn by stress and doubt. He poured 2 cups of water from the dispenser and handed one to Daniel. "You saved us," Bray said simply. "But I need to know. What are we dealing with?" Daniel stared at the surface of his cup. He thought of the visions, the whispers, the glowing eyes. He thought of the ruins outside, the dead civilization that had collapsed because it was too perfect. Finally, he said, "She's not alive. Not the way we are. She's a fragment, a memory, maybe an echo of what her people were. They built wonders, but they died because they couldn't adapt. She's trying to pass what's left of them to us. She wants us to carry it forward." The captain studied him. "And you trust her?" Daniel hesitated, then nodded. "Not because she's perfect, because she's broken, just like us. That's why she chose humans." That night, Daniel waited in his quarters again. He knew she would come. At 02:14, the air thickened and she appeared. But this time she didn't stand at a distance. She stood right before him, her glowing eyes softer, her form flickering like it was unraveling. Daniel whispered, "You're fading." Her voice brushed his mind, gentle but heavy with finality. "My time ends. My people's echo cannot last. But you endure." Daniel felt his throat tighten. "I don't know if I can carry all of this. Not all. Only what matters." Images flooded his mind, flashes of alien cities, machines spanning stars, songs of logic and order. Then images of their downfall, systems failing, order collapsing, a people unable to bend without breaking. Finally, a last image burned into him: humanity. Messy, chaotic, stumbling, but still standing. "This is why," her voice whispered. "This is why you will go further than we did. Where perfection failed, imperfection will survive." And then, for the first time, she smiled. A small, fragile smile, and faded forever. The next day, Daniel walked the corridors of the Resolute in silence. He felt empty and full at the same time. The whisper of her presence was gone, but the knowledge she left behind remained. Fragments burned into his mind like faint starlight. Lieutenant Havers found him staring out of a viewport at the ruins of the ring. "She's gone, isn't she?" Havers asked quietly. Daniel nodded. Havers looked at him for a long moment, then said, Do you think we can really do it? Carry their legacy? Daniel thought of Earth, of humanity's endless wars and arguments, of their stubbornness, their chaos, their will to survive against everything. Yes, he said finally. Because we're not perfect. That's why we'll make it. The Zarth fleet never returned to that system. Perhaps they were frightened by what had happened, or perhaps they saw no value in chasing prey they couldn't predict. Either way, the Resolute limped home weeks later, battered but victorious. The story spread quickly. A lone human ship had faced a superior fleet and survived. Whispers of the ghost of the Resolute circulated through military channels, some dismissing it as rumor,